Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, everyone out there on Facebook. We're excited to join you today. This is the Christian Career Women podcast, and I'm your host, Ellie Nieves. At the Christian Career Women, we help women of faith to aspire, achieve, and thrive in their careers and personal lives. To join our network and to learn more, you can visit our website at christiancareerwomen.com, or you can follow Christian Career Women on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome to our courageous conversation. The past couple of weeks have been difficult, challenging, disturbing. Many of us have struggled to make sense of all the unnecessary and devastating hurt and damage that has been caused by racism in our communities. And the tragic and brutal killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor just demonstrate that we still have a lot of work to do in exposing and eradicating systemic and institutional racism in America. Last week, the Christian Career Women Network hosted a courageous conversation in the form of an open forum for our members and others to share their personal experiences, ask questions, and to learn from each other. And today, we're going to take that conversation to the next level. We're going to engage in a God-led, Holy Spirit-driven discussion about the role that we as Christian women in the marketplace can play at home, at work, and in our communities to share God's love during this time. Our first guest is a returning guest, Mita Washington. Mita is an on-air personality for Kirk Franklin's Praise radio show on Sirius XM satellite radio in New York City. She is also the founder of letspraytogether.org. And our second guest is Lisa Lord, who participated in our courageous conversation just last week. Lisa is an HR executive for Fortune 500 companies across multiple industries. And as an executive coach, consultant, workshop facilitator, and speaker, Lisa's focus is to help leaders to transform themselves and as a result, transform their organizations. Mita and Lisa, welcome to the Christian Career Women podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I just want to give you guys a few seconds to just share a little bit about yourselves. And maybe Mita, we can start with you, and then Lisa, we can have you share.
Great.
Sure. As Ellie mentioned, I am an on-air talent for Kirk Franklin's Praise on Sirius XM. I've been in the position for about 20 years now on air.
Wow.
It's a passion of mine to work with God's people. I've done so through connecting churches and people who are looking for churches through my website, letspraytogether.org. And anyone who's tuned in to the show on Tuesdays, they know that I take the opportunity to do a little fun time with the Lord and, just have a Bible trivia where, people can kind of interact and take an opportunity to learn more about the word.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. It's so nice to meet you. I'm Lisa Lord, and I actually do consulting work on my own now since I've left corporate life. As I told the people that joined us last week, God, was that last week? It's really something new for me as a white woman to recognize that I had been inattentive to and even guilty of invalidating and inflicting harm because of the fact that I was socialized white. And it was a kind of rude awakening for me when I saw myself through the eyes of Robin DiAngelo, who wrote a book called White Fragility. And it made me realize I needed to look at myself more deeply and understand what I needed to do to be different. Not, where I needed to march or send the check, but what was the work I needed to do to figure out how could I behave that way and not even known it? And what could I do to be different? And that's been how I pivoted my work in the past year and a half. And the irony of it is people weren't ready to hear me and, call it divine intervention. It's so sad that there had to be a tipping point of such sadness, but that tends to be what happens with tragedy, that maybe it wakes people up to learn. And so My perspective is that of a white woman trying to help other white women figure out what we need to know to be better.
That's wonderful, Lisa. And that's actually why I invited Lisa to be a part of this discussion, because when I met Lisa a year ago, this was what she was sharing. And it was interesting because at the time, things felt like they were okay, right? We didn't have any major issues on TV that we were dealing with that were dramatic the way they are right now, right? Dramatic in a way that it's forcing us into a conversation. And it was interesting because, Lisa, when you shared that that was the message that you were leaning towards, I was asking myself, I'm like, that's interesting. Who's going to hear her right now, right? But I just, as a Christian woman, I believe God was preparing your heart, right? He was preparing you for this moment. And absolutely, we're all prepared to hear not only our Black and brown brothers and sisters in their struggle, but we're also prepared to hear the voices of the allies who are prepared to step up and also lend their voice to this very important conversation.
That's correct.
So Mita, I'm really interested in hearing what you might be hearing. You've got your finger on the pulse of the community. I know people are reaching out to you. What are you hearing from the community?
Well, a lot of what the community is talking about right now, I mean, they were already feeling the weight of what was going on with the pandemic. And this is just like one more thing. But it's the timing in which it all is happening. I think a lot of the community, they're still searching for connections of, what is God doing right now? God is obviously doing something where he's basically reset the whole world, put everybody on pause. Now it's like we have this moment of unrest that could have come, at, maybe 4 months ago before the pandemic. But it happened now at a time where people are available. People, are available to participate in these types of protests and pay attention in ways that they hadn't done before. So I think a lot of what's going on in the faith-based community is people are trying to make sense of why is it happening now, as opposed to, we've gone through 400 years in which we've, kind of pivoted in different ways and dealing with racism and dealing with race, relations and issues that have cropped up. Well, why now? Why is it suddenly become, we put our attention on it for once, collectively.
And Lisa, how about you in the community that you're in? You're working with HR professionals and corporations and others who are also very active in having these discussions and talking about how they can now take those transformative moves that are necessary in order to transform the workplace.
So it's really interesting. There's a definite desire to do something, like a feeling of frustration in the communities I work in, that what can I do? How can I do more? What can I make happen? And the piece that I'm hoping to bring to the conversation is to quit looking just at what you can do with your hands and focus rather on what you can do with your heart. Because as soon as we get inside ourselves, inside our own heart, and we start sort of opening up what's going on in my house, what are the messages I've been ingesting, what have I been spewing and not really considering the impact that it had on people. And what I would say is these communities of HR, a lot of women, a lot of white women, a lot of women in pharma, because I have a big pharmaceuticals background, they're finally experiencing me not as militant, right? So, the same biases were held against me raising issues about race as they're held against anyone who raised issues about race. But this opening that we've got, this gift that we've got of a chance to converse has just opened up the eyes and ears of the people I interact with. So the people who think that it's okay in human resources to compare groups by minority and non-minority. And I say, well, what is non-minority? Isn't that white people? And, well, I don't think we could say that. Why can't you say that? We're white. Like, what's wrong with it? So those kinds of things that people never would have been open to exploring seem to be, because there's a bit of rawness, there's an opening in their hearts to hear. And what they really are struggling with is how could I do anything that could make any difference? And that's the message that I'm hoping people start to get. Actually, it's the opposite. Anything you can do can make a difference.
Great.
I actually wanted to speak to Lisa, knowing that she's HR, just to share some of the things that, you know, over the years that I kind of found myself accepting as this is just the way it is. I mean, I have had people say to me in the office, oh, you're very, you know, not in the radio station, this is the other,
Yeah.
but, you know, oh, you're very articulate.
Mm-hmm.
Or someone would say, where are you from?
Yep.
You know, or another one that had come my way was, someone said, oh, someone literally said to me one time, I took the initiative on doing something that I knew had to be done, like there were steps involved. And when she realized I made the steps, she said, oh, you were smart enough to know to do that. She literally said those words to me. And I, not that it matters, I wasn't a teenager, I wasn't in my 20s. I was already in my 30s at that point when that was said. And I say that to say again, you know, oftentimes people of color have come to take these interactions as this is just the way it is when you are dealing with people that are not of color, and it's just part of the game. And we learn to put on two faces, the one that looks non-threatening, the one that is happy even when you're not happy because you don't want to look assertive or aggressive at the wrong times, and just the one that hears those types of things and will go home and kiki about it and laugh about it with friends and relatives, but the hurt that
it's still there.
Know, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry for that experience, and I so understand it that it's HR that people go to in the workplace. And when they hear, oh, it's just in your imagination, or they hear, well, why does everything have to be about race? Or you just don't know him, you're interpreting it the wrong way. That's not what he meant. I have to tell you, I still get that from people who are not open-hearted enough yet to hear. And what I realize is there is an amount of grace and kindness and compassion that has been offered to me as a white woman my entire life from women of color, and particularly from Black women, who just say, oh, she doesn't get it. And they find a way to still keep going. It breaks my heart to think that anybody would have to come into the workplace and not be able to bring their true, authentic selves. And there's so much research that the highest performing teams are ones where everyone on the team feels like they can bring their true, authentic selves, and they don't feel like they have to put on that mask or be guarded. But more importantly, workplaces are a place of human beings, and human resources seem to have forgotten that we're human. And I know for me in the past, I didn't recognize I had literally put up a veil or a guard between me and women of color unnecessarily. But it was what I'd ingested. So of course it's what came out of me. So until I started ingesting something different, consuming a diet of things that were created by Black people, consuming media, reading Black Twitter, following Rachel Cargle, paying attention to Red Table Talk, just finding a way where I could hear things and consume things that were different from my natural white upbringing and the privilege that afforded. I have to consume that every single day to keep myself in check. I don't know if that answers your question about HR. There's clearly a lot of work for us to do there.
I love what you were saying about consuming Black media and diverse
Yeah.
media. I just turned on Amazon Prime this weekend, and they had a whole slew of movies focused on the Black experience in America. And these are movies that would typically cost something to rent, and they're providing them for free. You know, and in this day and age, we could even go on YouTube and just or Google things about the Black experience in America, right? So there are so many tools at our disposal today that we can very easily just tap into, so that we can learn if we're not already well versed or well educated about a particular group of people. And in this day and age where we encounter so much diversity in this country, it's really incumbent upon us to step out of our comfort zones to learn more. And what I've heard some of my neighbors say is, well, that's not a problem here.
Right.
No, it is a problem.
You know, there's an analogy I heard someone use, and I'll clean it up. You know, it's like you can't do your business in one side of the pool and don't expect that it will not spread to the other.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And I have to say that the part about consuming and ingesting, what was really important to me was having access to someone who was open to talking about this with me, because I was processing my own stuff, because with it came a lot of shame and guilt, and that's not going to get anybody anywhere. So I had to work on that stuff. But when I started discovering things, I wanted someone to share it with. And the funny part was, if I reached out to a friend, an African-American Latina woman really started me on this whole path. She's a terrific friend. When I'd reach out to her, she'd just laugh at me like, you never knew that? And I'm like, oh, I guess I need to be reaching out to other white people to tell them what I'm discovering, what I learned about the Tulsa Massacre and Black Wall Street, and listening to 1619 on the New York Times podcast, and hearing the actual stories and the facts and the truth, and recognizing systemic racism isn't a bunch of white guys in the back room saying, how can we get the Black guy? It's really the belief and the fear that drove actions that have become fabric and woven into how everything is operating today. And unlearning that and reading Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram Kendi, like all these things I've started ingesting and learning, and they all force me to recognize that it was all out there all the time. I just never saw it before. I'll give you one example as sort of a metaphor. I had the good fortune of living abroad for a couple of years with work. I lived in Germany. And when I got there, I had 3 kids, a husband, a dog. I went grocery shopping, and I remember calling my husband and saying, I can't find anything to make for the kids. This is awful. And about 3 weeks later, I'm in the same grocery store, and I called my husband and I said, oh my God, they have brownie mix. Well, the brownie mix had been there all the time, but I didn't know how to look for it. I wasn't open to finding it. And that's what I think is so critical, that it's not about getting defensive. It's not about telling other people they're wrong and you're right. It's about being open-hearted enough to let something else in and let something new come out, instead of the same thing that was just sort of created by somebody else that I had no say in.
Yes, you hit it exactly on the nail, which is what I want to communicate to my neighbors and people in my community, which is that we just need to be open to understanding that someone else's experience can be very different than ours. And just because we haven't been exposed to something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And if anything, if we do hear a lot of voices outside of where we stand saying something, then that's a step and a call for us to actually say, you know what, let me stop for a minute. I'm hearing this a lot. I might not see it in my everyday, but I'm hearing it a lot. Why am I hearing it so much? What can I do now to educate myself about what I'm hearing, to see if there is something going on, and to see what role I might play here?
I think one of the things that's kind of fascinating me about this moment is I'm wondering, where is it going? Is with the momentum that's going on, is there going to be a permanent shift, or is this just I've got time and it's a I would hate to think that it's a fad.
I know. Oh my
You
gosh,
know?
I have the same fear.
Yeah. Or maybe God has chosen this moment because we have time,
That's
Right.
right. And
right?
that was the thing of why now?
Yeah, because we're always so distracted with our day to day,
Mhm.
right? That it's easy to shut the TV off or to shut the news off or to pretend things aren't happening in the workplace when we're encountering microaggressions or situations like that. But here we are, we're in a situation where we need to stop, think, focus. I think that before we even got to this place, or as we were leading up to this place because of the COVID-19 virus, a lot of people were engaging in a lot of self-analysis, a lot of self-reflection, just a lot of inventory taking. So perhaps, it was for such a time as this, right? Where people were actually having to look inward to reassess their lives, reassess what their priorities were, to really stop and look and see what's really happening in our society and take accountability for the role that each of us play in what plays itself out in the media.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of important to look at the timing of it. As you mentioned, Ellie, it happened exactly like 3 months into the new year. I mean, it's a time in which everybody's saying, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make these types of changes. And you literally have a mental list that you have already prepared on your own, for what's happening in the next 3 months, 6 months, for this
Yeah.
year. And it all, came to a screeching halt
Right.
immediately. And, for a lot of people of faith, it was like, okay, we're just going to pray through it and we'll be over it. But it's like, okay, now we're 6 months into it. So
Yeah.
now it's a bit of, it's a challenge for the faith-based community in saying, okay, so we're not physically going to church anymore, but we are still meeting virtually. It's kind of sort of, are we physically ever going to go back into the church? Is this what it is now? So, to now have, these other challenges on top of it, it was kind of like, okay, we've got it figured out now. And, God kind of steps in and goes, you don't
Yeah.
have this thing figured out, because people are like, okay, we're going to get past the pandemic and then this is what we're going to do. And
Right.
Mhm.
Right. But I think, Mita, that I love what you're saying, because I go back to what you asked me at the beginning about HR. I think it was, okay, this is the world, this is the box we're allowed to operate within. Now we know what we're going to go do. And it's as if God said, no, 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 you've defined that box way too small.
Mhm.
And there are way bigger plans for you. And you need way more support than is currently being offered to you. And so here you go.
Mhm.
Here's the opportunity.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that one of the things I worry about is, I know from working in corporate America and just from being an American, we have a very strong work ethic built into our culture. And that work ethic leads people to do, to act, to be productive. And so one of the benefits of COVID was it forced people to quiet down and still a little bit, maybe to hear that voice within. But because it's in our nature and we're so hardwired to act, I worry that people won't do the self work
Mm.
I know is necessary. So I'll give you another example. One of the people I follow is Layla Saad. She wrote a great book called Me and White Supremacy, and brilliant. I got to see her speak in person before COVID. And I remember she said something. She was telling a story about an experience her little girl had at school. And she said, well, you need to tell your friend that what she said was racist.
Mm.
And I remember sitting in the audience. Now, I've been working on myself, I'm doing my work, sitting in the audience, and I cringed. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's not nice to tell a girl she's racist, a little girl. And then, like, because I've been doing the work, I could say, isn't that interesting? Why am I so uncomfortable with that? oh, I'm uncomfortable with it because I wouldn't want to be called that. Why wouldn't I want to be called that? Because of all that goes with it, because of the presumption that I'm a neo-Nazi, white supremacist. And that's not what she was saying. She's calling a fact that it's hurtful, that it's invalidating, and that it calls me out as different and not as much as because of my race. And so the word for that was racist, but white people have a real hard time with that word, just like we do with white supremacy, because of how we've ingested what it's meant. If we can look at ourselves and really get that moment to say, whoa, why did that sting? Or why did that hurt? Or why am I having that reaction? And just meet our judgment with curiosity, so much more is possible. And my fear is people will be too quick to act and miss out on that opportunity to do the self work.
You know, I think the term racist, people have come to receive that as something that only applies to Caucasian people.
Yeah.
You know, when you hear racist, it's like, oh, you're talking about white people. You know, there are people who are Black or of other ethnicities
Right.
that use unsavory
Yep.
terms towards other races. And I don't hear people saying, oh, they're racist.
That's
They
right.
just have a certain opinion. But I hear people refer to white people as racist.
Mm-hmm. Right. And really, we're all consuming the same diet. It's just a matter of how our body metabolizes it and how the culture around us metabolizes it. But we're all really consuming the same diet, which is just filled with all kinds of separate, different, not as good as messages. Women, not enough, not thin enough, not young enough, not white enough, not light enough. Whatever it is, it's not enough. When you all know, as faith-based women, that we were born enough when we were born. We've been more than enough. That's how we came to be in existence. So, wow, why are we consuming so much of a diet that tells us we're not?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, on top of being a faith-based woman, when you go into a workplace, it's like you have to keep that part of you quiet.
Right.
You know, like there's a certain, you know, people of color don't want to be seen as volatile because they are people of faith. There's a lot of messages that you go into the office with, even when you start. First, being that you have to be twice as good as everyone else to
Mm-hmm.
keep your job, no matter what that job is. And anyone could come and take your job at any time. I think the fact that there's so many people out of work right now, one of the things that a lot of faith-based people are concerned with is what's going to happen when we all have to
That's
try
right.
to get jobs, because now there are tons of people who are white and of other ethnicities to
Yep.
choose from, and they're out of work too. They're going to
Mhm.
get first preference,
That's
is
right.
the thinking. You know, it's not a thing of, oh, well, I've worked the job for many, many years. I have the education, I have the background. Now it's like, okay, they're out of work too. And when it comes time to start filling the jobs, they're going to get chosen first. And we're just going to have to try to figure out what we're going to have to do to make ends meet until, you
Mhm.
know, the quotas are filled.
Yeah, so unacceptable. And I do know that HR in general is working really hard to figure out how to remove the bias from the hiring process, to the extent that they black out or redact the names. They insist that there be paper exchange between people before there's any vocal exchange. They have to choose their best candidate based on the slate that's offered to them. So the recruiters have to make sure there are all different kinds of people in the slate. And then when they lean towards someone who looks more like them, really challenging them on how is that going to add value to your team in a way that you don't already have on your team. But this is, you're talking about hundreds of years of practice that have to be overturned. But the more we can make them aware of it, that's why I go back to their heart, because if they could really get in touch with themselves, I just believe when we're quiet and we're still, the answer will come. And we all know when someone says something off color. Like everybody knows that. You know what it feels like. Where do you get the courage to speak up when you see that happen? And in the workplace, when you're talking about your livelihood, it's very unlikely, especially unlikely, to ask a person of color to be the one who speaks up. It has to be their allies that have a closer alignment to the people in power, most likely white people.
Yeah. Lisa, I got to tell you, and Ellie, I didn't mean to cut, but I really was so cynical when I first started realizing that people were doing interviews by video conference, because I thought that was an opportunity in which to see someone, realize that they were a person of color, and go, they're not a fit, or they're too old, or there's some, not just the color bias, but this person is too old. They don't fit because of maybe they're too big, too small, like you said.
Mm-hmm. 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 So Mita and Lisa, what can we as women of faith who are in the marketplace, who are interacting with people at home, people at work, people in our communities, what can we do to try to change the narrative?
I really think we have to be patient with one another. Realize that we don't have each other figured out. I think even people of faith, they kind of separate themselves in unnecessary ways. It's like people say, being in the world, but not of the world. Don't take that to be a separatist type of statement. We really have to be more accepting of people who are even not of faith. We can't wall ourselves off and go, okay, this is us and this is them. We really have to be more, this is a time where we are forced to be patient in so many ways. And I think being patient with each other is a big part of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I would add, really get curious and meet your judgment with curiosity. When you have one of those feelings of, ooh, I didn't like that, ask yourself why. Or like I said to someone on Ellie's call last week, if someone says something like, oh, you're so articulate, where the undertone is for a Black woman, and, rather than getting defensive, meet that judgment with curiosity and simply ask, well, thank you. I assume you mean that as a compliment. Have you met any other Black women who are articulate? Just curious.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Well, wow, I don't know. I guess Oprah. Oh, okay. So you say I'm like Oprah. I like that. Thanks.
Well, Michelle is now
Michelle Obama. She's
now the new standard.
There you go.
Compared to, it's
exactly. So all right. And the thing is that when a white person says this, they can find 10,000 other white people who say, I didn't mean that as an insult. No, it doesn't matter what your intent is. What matters is the impact. So get curious.
Right.
Wow, why did I have that impact on you? Just that to me would be something anyone can do to try and improve the situation.
And do you have any suggested resources for women of faith who want to lend their voice to the conversation?
I have one that I'm just madly in love with right now, because I've been following so many different people. Dr. Amanda Kemp, she has a program called Racial Justice from the Heart. And it really connected for me. And I'm actually going through her training program for trainers and facilitators at the end of the month. Brilliant, beautiful woman. Check her out, Amanda Kemp, K-E-M-P.
Thank you, Lisa.
I don't have a particular resource. My resource is what it's always been, straight from the Bible. I say there's nothing new under the sun. Every circumstance that we face today, you can look at the Bible and see some instance and where there were people who were facing, mysterious plagues, or, something, yeah, something is going on where there's an oppression of a group of people as opposed to, the ruler. I mean, you could see it all
It's
there.
all there.
Yeah, in some instance.
And
How faith carries you.
yeah, that's how I approach it as well. When I think about what's happening in this day and age, I mean, the Bible even talks about that, right? I was looking at the Bible, and I have the scripture I wrote here, Galatians 3:28. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male nor female. You are all one in Christ Jesus, right? So if we approach the world with that kind of love, it sets a level playing field for all of us, right? Where we're all equal and we are all coming together with the love of Christ. So if we approach the world in that way, I think we can make a difference. And, by asking questions and by being compassionate and understanding where we might have some gaps. And as you said earlier, Mita, as well, just because you're a person of color doesn't mean that you might not have also some work to do internally. Some of us also struggle with anger, resentment because of, discrimination that we might have faced in the past, or we might even carry preconceived notions about how we think others think of us. And then that in turn makes us behave in certain ways towards others.
It's true.
So I think we have to have a collective, holistic discussion and self-reflective period. This is not just about white people. It's not just about brown and black, right? It's about us as a community, especially if you're coming from a community of faith, to engage in that kind of reflective practice.
Absolutely.
I agree.
So ladies, tell us how our listeners and our viewers can follow you if they want to learn more about each of you.
Lisa?
Well, you can find me at lisalordconsulting.com. That's my website. I also have a YouTube channel. It's the name is The Lisa Lord, THE, Lisa Lord. And every week I put out a little 2-minute video just to offer a little bit of coaching advice for free. So sign up and you can hear more.
And I love that your last name is Lord.
I know, right? Right?
Yep. Well, for myself, I actually am on social media. On Facebook, you can find me under Mita Washington, META. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And again, I have my website. I always am mindful that there might be somebody tuning in right now that is kind of sitting on the fence in terms of their salvation, Christianity. If you want to know anything about it, you can always reach out to me at those emails at letspraytogether.org. And certainly, everyone can go to a virtual church now. So I invite you to Christ. I take every opportunity I can.
Thank you, Mita. Thank you, Lisa, for engaging in this courageous conversation.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you, Ellie.
You guys are wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and your insight. Now, to close out, I want to encourage our community of Christian career women. As women of faith in the marketplace, we are uniquely positioned to make an impact during this time. First and foremost, by praying and asking God to heal our nation. And the next step is to shine where you are. God has given each of us a ministry at home, at work, and in our communities. And that ministry is your platform to shine God's light. So let's make the most of this opportunity to engage in constructive conversations, ask questions, and serve as a voice for those who need to be heard. Thank you so much for joining us for this courageous conversation. And until next time, God bless.
God bless. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.